You are watching Travel World Online.
Hybrid Arabian Travel Market 2021 begins tomorrow. Air India's 4.5 million passengers data breached, including personal data and passport info. Middle East aviation experts optimistic about rebound in 2021. Thai's open letter to PM Shri Narendra Modi to draw his attention to the issues related to livelihood, survival of travel trade. Sudha Murthy gives 10,000 Indian rupees each to 300 tourist guides in Karnataka. Tourism experts gather in Spain's capital to chart the future of post-COVID travel. South African tourism to participate at ATM Virtual 2021. Representation to Ministry by TAFE and HRA Gujarat to waive off RT-PCR for double vaccinated people. Tourism is a strategic sector and an essential piece for the reactivation of the economy, Jose Vicente de los Mozos. Type of vaccine administered would regulate international travel is not true, tweeted PIB. Air India's passenger service system provider Sita faced a cyber attack. Personal data, including name, date of birth, contact information, passport information, ticket information, and credit card data, which was registered between August 11, 2011, and February 3, 2021, has been leaked. Air India meanwhile is in liaison with various regulatory agencies in India and abroad, and has apprised them about the incident in accordance with its obligations. We would also encourage passengers to change passwords wherever applicable to ensure the safety of their personal data, Air India said in a statement. The first in-person event post-COVID-19 in Middle East was successfully concluded last week. ATM welcomed exhibitors from 62 countries and travel professionals from over 100 countries. Now the virtual element of hybrid ATM is all set to take place from the 24th to the 26th of May. Day 1 highlights include keynote interviews with Emirates President Sir Tim Clark and IATA's Director General Willie Walsh. Other key topics to be discussed on the first day of ATM Virtual 2021 are regional tourism, destinations, and technology. Thai through its open letter requested Honorable Prime Minister to provide immediate support to all engaged in travel and tourism. The letter says that travel and tourism industry employs over 11% of the total workforce in the country and generates approx. 10% of the national GDP. Before pandemic, during last 14 plus months the trade could generate only 5% business as compared to the pre-lockdown, pre-pandemic times. Due to this, basic survival has become a challenge. The worst hit are junior and mid-level teams, who found it difficult to survive even for basic needs. Further, with no respite whatsoever in statutory compliances like PF, ESIC, professional tax, GST, income tax, TDS, etc., and with the introduction of the new irrational tax like TCS, ensure that our establishments are forced to close down. On financial front, many banks and financial institutions have blacklisted travel and tourism organizations being non-revenue generators since April 20. Even the existing limits have been reduced in some cases. The association seeks support in terms of repayable loans, moratorium for at least 2 years from all loan MS, fresh collateral-free loans, overdraft facilities to our member organizations and personnel, refundable grant of 10,000 rupees per month per employee for the next 1 year, income tax holiday for next 5 years. Thai also requested to reduce charges from 2.5 to 0.5% on digital payments. Thai assured the government to strive hard to drive the change and to make the industry more resilient and productive, along with their full support to the government. The Fair Fitur brings together more than 5,000 participants from 5 continents, with the presence of all Spain's regions, companies and destinations from 55 countries, and 37 official representations. In addition to the participation of trade visitors of 79 nationalities, this offers a new digital platform, Fitur Live Connect, to join virtually. Around 1 lakh visitors are expected to attend the event during 5 days. This is the first such in-person event in Europe in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic. Team TAFE and Hotel and Restaurant Association of Gujarat has communicated by email with various authorities including Union Minister of Tourism, Prahlad Singh Patel, Secretary Tourism Government of India and Tourism Minister Gujarat to waive RT-PCR report for double vaccinated passengers. This will boost tourism efforts as well as the people of India will get an incentive to get themselves vaccinated. This is in alignment with the national drive for the vaccination.
Make your business crisis-proof. Learn ways and techniques to not only survive but revive your travel business. Only one day left to book your seat at this amazing offer.
Overview. Typically, I charge 10,000 for this, typically, but only for you and only for today because we are coming in live through Travel World online platform, and Anil did very high negotiations with me. So I have made it an offer of 3,499 only for a day. Right. So I'll tell you what all things you get. You get an ebook. You get how to generate ads. So you get this. So this is the agenda for next 5 days. You will learn how to get amazing customers. Okay. You will learn how to convert your service into a product, the RCH model. I will teach you how to generate leads daily. I'll teach you that. I will teach you how to create followers and fans. And I will teach you how to become self-sufficient.
The president of the IFEMA Executive Committee, Jose Vicente de los Mozos, thanked all the participants of FITUR 2021 for their courage and their drive. He said, "The positive energy that floods in our pavilions and the joy of reunion is already perceived, and thanks to His Majesty it is for your presence here today. This is a symbol of the support and commitment of our entire country with the tourism. This is the first major international fair to be held in Europe in the year 2021. All eyes are on us in Madrid and on our country. That is precisely why it is so relevant. What is going to happen in these pavilions in the next few days will strengthen the recovery process. Tourism is a strategic sector and an essential piece for the reactivation of the economy. That is why we wanted to give this edition of FITUR the qualifier of special recovery. Spain holds a global leadership that we must maintain. FITUR has arrived at the right time to launch this message to the world that tourism is back." Virtual ATM event kicked off today with Sir Tim Clark's interview by top aviation consultant John Strickland. During the conversation, Sir Tim Clark, President of Emirates, gave a candid outlook about the recovery of the aviation industry. He said,
"Well, the ideal situation, the utopian situation, is that the vaccine program beats the virus and in its many mutations, and that we are on top of that. Whether we'll get there, I don't know. But let's assume that is the case, and that, say, by the autumn of this year, October, November, December, you get some kind of relief from all of that. Demand will come back at a staggering rate. It'll, of course, people like Michael O'Leary are going to say the low cost will do well, because they probably will. The low cost will benefit from intra-European travel, as that's his speciality. The US domestic market, the Chinese domestic market, they will grow at pace. International travel, on the basis of that scenario I've just suggested, will return in large numbers. And I don't doubt that at all. The problem will be twofold. One is the ability of the airline community to meet the demand when it comes. And two, rolling into the next scenario, is what is the conditionality of country with regard to access requirements? And that circles back to the point I was making about travel certification. Are vaccine passports going to be an absolute mandatory requirement to go into, say, Australia, and vice versa, from the UAE, UK, Germany, or whatever? All that has to be established. As long as that is there, it'll be a natural inhibitor to not to the demand itself, but it's the ability to travel. Secondly, if you're going to introduce large elements of cost, then the individual and with his family traveling, facing PCRs or vaccination costs and all the other costs are coming in, that's going to inhibit demand as well. We've got to find a way that one, we can test quickly on the PCR basis. So I mean that you get almost like a saliva test or a breath test, and you get the results immediately. Secondly, the cost of doing that is virtually nothing. And people are not concerned that when they go abroad, they're not going to face a lockdown and a red listing or quarantine when they return. So there's a lot of work to be done to free off that pent-up demand. So long as those things are there, demand is going to be restrained. And you talk about the United Kingdom, where you are at the moment. It is likely, given going forward what is happening, that a lot of the UK population who want to travel abroad and want a holiday, say, will rather do it in the UK. So all your coastal resort towns are now fully booked for the summer because people are hedging their bets really. So it's a question of waiting and seeing what actually happens. Things like what's happened in India recently that doesn't help because clearly that has poleaxed the country and has had ripple effect across the global economy, principally by what everybody sees. So that in itself is going to inhibit demand. People are going to be a little bit nervous, a bit worried. The airline community, again, I don't want to sort of boast or sort of blow our own trumpet. The fact of the matter is the airports and the airlines of the world have really, really, really worked hard to sanitize, and I don't just mean in air quality, sanitize how they go about dealing with passengers, so their crews, the protocols, everything else are there. So in terms of concerns about going to an airport or going on an aeroplane, the risks are mitigated by all the protocols we've kicked in. But that's not going to be enough. So it's a question of seeing how we navigate the next 6 months. And if we do it right, and I say an equitable rollout, vaccines are scaled, vaccines are distributed, the testing regimes are simplified and made cheaper. All this lends to the theory that by the end of the year we'll be back in business in some scale, at some scale. But we have to wait and see.
In response to the question of filling the seats on board for premium economy and business class, Sir Tim Clark said,
Well, it's a fair point, John. As you know, I've never really subscribed to it.
Yeah.
Often quoted the mid-90s when the digital age hit the planet, and the great video conferencing started to take a major part in our lives. So much I remember trying to work on the 380 in the early part of the 2000s, trying to get video conferencing capability into the seats of our aircraft. And it was driving a lot of that. But I always shared the view, so long as the global economy continued to expand, certainly the pace it was going, that businesses were growing in absolute numbers exponentially. And there were new types of business coming to the market driven by the digital era. We know, we could talk at length about those kind of things. So there was a shift from the huge corporations to multiple SMEs who enriched themselves on the basis of the digital economy. And they had the tools, the digital, the automation tools to do what we are doing today. But look what actually happened. We rocketed. The number of people on the airlines of the world in those particular segments rocketed. Now, what then happened was that there was a view that first class was perhaps not affordable for those, but definitely business class was to be the case. And if you look at what happened in certain airlines, I won't mention them, but close to you, they expanded their business class in large amounts and reduced the economy. And one of the previous CEOs of that airline, you probably know what I'm talking about, says, I don't want backpackers. I want all the business community, and I'm going to make my airplanes basically business driven. Now, this was coming at a time when we were moving through into the digital age. The point I'm trying to make is that whether you get to 9/11, whether you get to 208, 209, look at the data. Look at what actually happened. Do I see that changing? Do I see the global economy going into a tailspin? No, I don't. Do I see the global economy expanding to the level perhaps that it did before? Actually, yes, I do. Driven by the very thing that we're doing. Now, the fact that we're communicating, businesses are communicating as we are doing to Zoom, Team, etc., that in itself engenders more business. And therefore, whatever you might be thinking of doing, if you're looking for a production base, if you're in that kind of business, or you're a service industry or whatever, in the end, you want to go and have a look and talk and see. You can do a lot as we're doing, probably more than they would have done in the past, but that will cause more people to travel. This is a paradox which flies in the face of some of the scenarios, one of which you've just mentioned. I don't believe that. I believe that I'm not saying the Zoom and Team is a bad thing. It's great because over this last year, these platforms have really, really improved the quality. You think back of how long, 18 months ago, we were all struggling with mutes and buttons and losing people and Wi-Fi resilience, etc. Now they're really good platforms, and there'll be more coming. And they'll be on the PDAs far more readily than sitting at a desk like we're doing at the moment. But do I think that's going to change demand for travel in those segments? I think it'll change the type of business that goes into that. There will be new segments created. The traditional ones may take the view and say, well, we'll sit back and we'll do it over Zoom and Teams. But as I think I was reading in the Financial Times today, Polita Clark, who I'm a great fan of, she wrote that, you know, the whole business about the interaction of the human, you know, the meetings that you have on Zoom and Teams, and sometimes you can't get a word in edgeways because everybody's trying to speak at the same time. And it's a bit like hold up the spoon, the speaking spoon, if you want to be heard. The actual interaction of people, doing the people thing, which is getting to know, understand the tactile human interaction, which we don't necessarily get on Zoom. These come with conferences, with the mice business, etc. And so do I see that going south? No, I don't. I'm afraid I do not subscribe to that thinking at all. I think the human is as human as he or she was back in the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s. They want more. They want to go and see. They want to travel. They want to meet people. They want to experience things. They actually want to see what their production centers look like, how they smell, how they work, how you can make a judgment of that rather than be fooled by somebody who takes you by the nose on Zoom or Team or an iPhone and says, here's my production center. Well, they won't show you all things that you really want to see. And you don't really get to know people in terms of, are they people that you really want to do business with, until you have a more 360 degree of that individual or group of individuals that you're doing business with. And that's my view. Now, what will that do to the segmentation? Yes, I have been saying the segments will change. We've talked about VFR. I've often talked about baby boomers who, in the last decade, were excluded from the business class cabin by virtue of price. It was only when we learned in 2008, 2009, and laterally, and before that in 9/11, that when the corporate segments disappeared, only temporarily, that the price points fell and the cabins were filled up by the very people I've mentioned. What did that do? Well, actually, it gave us a lower income per seat, but the volume took care of the delta. So actually, we did very well. So the airline community has got to be able to adjust to the changing nature of demand, but not in absolute terms. The demand will return to 4.5 billion people a year, growing at 4 to 7% per annum. It'll be patchy by region, but honestly, I think it'll come back to that level. And one of the biggest single growth areas, again, will be in leisure. And as these, all the entities that came to market in the leisure, whether it be the hotel groups, the whatever they may be, city hotels, beach hotels, in the last 20 to 30 years, will energize, and they will attract more and more people who simply want to get out. This pent-up demand that you mentioned. It's because people have experienced it before. They know, they liked it. Look at the second home ownership, whether it be Thailand, France, Germany, Australia, etc. People bought homes on the belief that this would never end, that the air travel would be there for them permanently. They could jump on a plane from, I don't know, Stansted to Bordeaux and go and see their house in Bergerac or whatever. That's a global phenomenon, and people are globalized in their thinking, they're globalized in their aspirations, and that global approach to the way they are living today will drive demand in the future for international air travel.
John asked regarding expectations of travelers post-COVID, especially business travelers. Sir Tim Clark said.
Yes, I think to the point I was making earlier about the airlines adapting to the changing nature of demand, and that's part of it. So in the past, we never had the tools to be able to do that. But to create an a la carte menu for business class travel, which allows you to pick and choose is actually what, and the various price points that go with it, I think is a very smart thing to do. We've seen how it works in low cost, but perhaps that's been a little bit more controversial. But certainly we had rolled that out. It was working quite quickly. Our back of house systems to deal with that have been developed as we've been going through this year anyway. So we'll be in a position to offer not just the forecast product, but segments, types of product within those segments. So the versatility, the variety, I should say, of products you'll be able to buy as a result of the work that we're doing, and we're not alone in this, others are doing it. The industry is moving in that direction. The value proposition of doing that is really quite staggering, actually, if you get it right. And the important thing is that the whole process of, I saw recently that somebody had done that and hadn't told them that they weren't entitled to the lounge at the airport, and they kicked off and said, you know, I thought this was the price that covered everything. He said, well, actually, no, you're paying 50% less than you would have done normally. So there's a education process. But in the end, automation allows us to do all of that, even in the economy cabin as well.
And in terms of also the service, particularly in the premium cabins that goes with that, do you feel optimistic that that can be restored? I mean, the whole idea now of being on a long-haul flight and trying to have a cordon bleu meal with the cabin crew kitted out in PPE or everybody wearing masks isn't really too conducive, or because of the wonderful experience of the standard bar on the A380. Do you believe those kind of elements, which people appreciate, will be able to come back, or do you think they're going to need different aspects of modification, including the need to wear masks more often?
Well, look, John, it goes back to the point that I said this will come to an end. Mm-hmm. People have said that this particular virus is here forever. It's going to be in the community, like flu viruses. We will overcome whatever that means, whether it be vaccinations, whether it be the belief that you will not populate your hospitals and ICUs because you have viral therapeutics. The point I'm making is that in the fullness of time, it will all go away. So that the notion that you have all the things you mentioned, our crew today clad like Darth Vader, PPE, masks and visors, inhibiting what we really are good at doing, that'll all go. You've got to believe that. Otherwise, if it doesn't, imagine going to the opera, imagine going to a play, being on a train, a bus, or whatever. This will not work. The most important thing to do is crack the problem. And as I said, to the point we were talking about earlier with regard to the speed at which these vaccines came to market, we were driven by the belief then that a vaccine took 10 or 15 years. That was because there were about 4 minds working on it at one particular time. When you had the global best brains and minds, the levels, the numbers that were on it, it was no doubt that this was going to be accelerated. So I have a great belief that the cracking of this problem and others that may come later have been hugely enhanced, accelerated, if you like, by this. So why do I see all this thing going where the football matches, restaurants, hospitality, whatever it is, where people come together? Eventually, we will be back where we were, and this will be history. And that may take a couple of years in certain areas, depending on how quickly we get the vaccines rolled out. But in the end, you have to believe that this will be a passing phase, and we will restore ourselves to the way we used to be. Okay, it may have conditioned us. It may be, people may be a little bit wary, and maybe we'll be offering the means to control their own space. For instance, you might still give sanitized wipes to wipe your television in the back of the seat, or wipe the armrests, and things like that. There may be some concerns about that. But frankly, no, I'm of the belief that it'll all come back and things will be back to pre-COVID times, and we will move on.
And Tim, moving to another aspect of the future, looking at the network and the shape of the fleet, we touched on the A380 earlier in terms of using a modest number. Now you're optimistic about the aircraft. Certainly, my own view is that you are a better place than any airline just by sheer scale to use that aircraft effectively in the future with the Airbus A380, 2 A380 connections through a mature hub. Do you have any sense, or can you, or do you even maybe I could say, waste time doing many scenarios about how many of the total fleet you would envisage getting back at some point, or do you just assume you will get back to the full fleet, barring any that you stand down for cannibalization of spares as you've done already?
Well, yeah, you're right. We are working on multiple scenarios depending on the conditionality of access over time. All of them see the 380s very much playing a large role. It is true that we are stepping down 3 or 4 of them at the moment as they come to the end of their lease lives, etc. But that's where it ends. We still have 5 on delivery. 1's coming next month, 1 in June, and 3 probably the back end of next year, of this year or sometime next year. And they will remain as a stalwart of our fleet for the next 10 or 15 years. Nothing has changed, John, with regard to the raison d'etre of that aeroplane, with regard to access to constrained hubs, of which there are many, slot access, etc. And given that an airport like Dubai already was a super hub, one of the largest, if not the largest, hub in the world, it was providing an unbelievable choice, value, to people who didn't necessarily want to come to Dubai, just wanted to get from A to C over B in a very quick, efficient, hopefully enjoyable manner. Will that change? No, it doesn't. To the point I made earlier, if you believe that things will pick up again at pace once we're through this pandemic, the place for the 380 remains there, as far as I can see. The problem, of course, is that it's no longer being produced. I think ours are the last to be produced. What does the airline community do after that? Because the smallest aircraft then will be the 777-9, which, by the way, is about 130, 140 seats light on a 380. So we believe in scale. We believe that the whole economics of the hub and its unit costs, its incremental, marginal revenues that we get are vitally important. The more we put into it, the lower the cost of the hub, the lower the cost of the operation are. And the economics become extremely powerful for us in terms of the income streams and eventually the profit. So, yeah, I think the 380 will hopefully be here for a long time.
John asked about the fleet size and use of smaller aircraft. Sir Clark presented his vision and said,
Well, it was, John. It was the reason that we bought the 350s and the 777s was to allow us to open more points, more perhaps economically than putting a large ER on there or a 380. But this wasn't about contraction. This was expansion. This was taking the airline on, given what is going on in Dubai and how minded the government here is to expand the Emirates. We've already had directives given to us as to what the place is going to be looking like in 2030, 2040, and how the airline has to step up and meet those requirements. Not just us, but of course Fly Dubai. And so the notion that we would go south was never going to be the case. The problem becomes a little bit more acute in the early 30s when the 380s start to drop away. And bearing in mind that we have slot constraints at DWC, DIA here, and then we have to look at what's going to happen in the airfield in the south of Dubai World Central. But it's a high-class problem. It's not something that we believe we are going to go south on. Whoever believes that there is going to be contraction in what we do today, think again. The airline will be bigger. Hopefully, after my departure, it will be better than it's ever been. And will continue to excel in all the areas that we're going. Importantly, the city in Dubai is going to continue to expand at pace. And it already is. So they are sharing the view that beyond pandemic, things will move on quite quickly here. The competitive issues that we have to be careful about, but nevertheless, when we look at what the 737 family can do, and we look at what the ERs can do, the 350s, the 787-9s and the 777s and the 380, you have an extraordinary, I think I used the word, number of tools in your toolbox. And that gives you the ability, to the point I was making about growing the hub here, of taking your city size in terms of the network of the two airlines up to 350, 400 plus. And I don't know many international hubs in the world can get anywhere near that. They may try, but I wonder whether they'll be able to do it. Such is the strength of the pull of Dubai, as you mentioned earlier. It isn't just about transiting the hub, although there'll be a lot of that. Dubai is continuing to excel in its attraction. It has huge gravitational pull in the area, and I say within the 2,000-mile radius of Dubai. But also it's reaching out further, and there is more and more interest in that. So that'll drive what we do. The more you put in points and the more production you put into those points, the more they'll come to the city and also use you as a transit hub to go elsewhere. That's the thinking. You've got to believe that, as I said. You've got to believe that you can do that. But if you look at what Dubai was in the mid-80s to what it is today, and you look at what Emirates was in the mid-80s to what it is today, therein lies the proof.
You are watching Travel World Online.